what I really wanted to talk about today, obviously we talk about like some of the career transition stuff I just mentioned. Uh, but I guess what are some of the things I found in my own career as um, to me, what I think are some of the best practices around, I'm going to call it like something we refer to them as code smells, but especially what I think of as object oriented fundamentals, right? And typically a lot of the Salesforce, right, Apex code bases I've seen don't really use the power of Apex as an object oriented language, but a lot of the code bases I feel like don't really use that to its full power, right? We don't use the object oriented features of Apex and tend to write sometimes in a very procedural style. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good. And I think it can lead to really messy, hard to maintain code. So what we're going to really try to do today is I'm going to switch back and forth between my IDE and we're going to take a controller method, and I think this is fairly representative of something I feel like I could see. I don't know. No, great. Now I have it's not a hide. Um, we'll talk through it. I don't know why when I rebooted, like my symbol table is not loading. It doesn't realize it's part of a Salesforce project anymore. So everything keeps getting better. Um, I'm just going to try to do that real quick. Um, but I'm going to say fairly representative of, like a controller class I might see, right? So we are, kind of the idea being here, and, we're going to take something. It's always kind of a challenge, right? You want to make it simple enough that it makes an effective demonstration, but, not so simple it's kind of pointless to do. So kind of the idea being like we've got something where a user is going to, they're going to submit a payment, right? And we don't know until runtime, is that payment going to be a Visa, a MasterCard, a Discover? Maybe the business down the road wants to add support for, PayPal, Venmo, you name it. I don't know, cryptocurrency. So how do we do that? How do we make this flexible? So right now, this is what I'd say. Yeah, like we have a lot of conditional logic in here. Lots of parameters, lots of primitives, big pile of strings. And then we go down here, right? We're going to process this payment. And, again, we've got kind of the, if it's this, it's going to be a V, and then we're going to do this. And so anytime there's a change, right, we have to kind of break this open and we have to make modifications and potentially kind of disrupt the whole thing. So what we want to do is we're going to talk about how do we get from this to a controller method that looks more like this, right? And this is what I would say, and as a lead, like this is what I would want my controllers to look like, my presentation layer, as thin as possible, absolutely no business logic. So how do we do that? How do we get from point A to point B? So the things we're going to kind of talk about today to try to accomplish that. We're talking about the polymorphism in Apex. What does that mean? How do we use that? The concepts of programming to an interface and not an implementation is something you'll hear a lot. And that, frankly, like that used to, both of these actually used to really confuse the heck out of me. And primitive obsession. Also, I guess all of these used to really confuse me. And I picked primitive obsession because it's one of my favorite things in Martin Fowler's book, Refactoring, right? It's in his list of code smells. And I think it's a common one. It's probably one of the hardest ones to understand. So it's just one code smell we'll talk about today, and how do we deal with that? And so we're going to kind of take all of these things. How do we apply them in Apex in an everyday use case, and hopefully come up with a little more flexible, little stronger code. Also, guys, if there are questions along the way, let me know. I'm trying to glance over at the chat window from time to time, but I may miss it. So feel free to hop in and let me know, and I can stop anywhere along the way. So I do want to just see how okay, we're still rebuilding our symbol table. All right. So one of the things I want to talk about is polymorphism. And polymorphism, right? If for, is back to a Greek word of, many forms, many shapes, many types. Um, I think it's one of the most powerful features of an object-oriented language. Like it is to me like the great thing. And it allows us to add, but it's a big word and confusing, but it allows us to access objects of different types through the same interface. And then each type can have its own implementation of this interface. And there's really two kinds of polymorphism. So the first one I want to talk about, because I'm a fan of using this quite a bit, depending on the situation, is compile time polymorphism, or also referred to as method overloading. And this can be a really easy and I think good way sometimes to bulkify your code to make your methods a little more flexible. So I always think a